Guild Wars 2 was the sequel to the original Guild Wars, created by the company ArenaNet. The game initially started development in 2006 and finally launched when it was ready 6 years later on August 22, 2012. ArenaNet had announced their plans for creating a sequel in 2007 following the end of the last expansion to Guild Wars 1, Eye of the North. Set to take place 250 years after the original, this sequel was slated to be more MMO-y than the original, containing a persistent open world and higher level cap. Yet it still contained the amount of innovation and ArenaNet's charm that was to change the genre forever. The hype for the game was ongoing during its 6 years of development, with ArenaNet slowly unveiling their vision for the game. Guild Wars 2 was meant to have groundbreaking system design that went against the norms of an MMO for nearly a decade. There would be no sub-fees, no quests, no Holy Trinity, and no causes for bitterness between players in the open world. Instead, it would be like any other video game. Buy it once and play forever. Quests would be replaced with dynamic events that would spawn randomly wherever players found themselves in the world. For example, in a traditional MMO, you would hear about centaurs attacking a town, but in reality, they would be littered around a field doing nothing. In Guild Wars 2, the centaurs would actually attack the village, and if nothing was done, they would capture it. Additionally, players would be able to support one another combat-wise by combining skills. Every player could also revive one another, and every class had a dedicated self-healing skill, dismantling the Holy Trinity. In the open world, mobs, loot, and gathering nodes would all be shared between players instead of pitting them against one another in a first-come, first-served mentality that dominated the MMO space. It was meant to be a game changer. When the game finally launched, players flocked into the remolded world of Tyria. As opposed to most other MMOs, the leveling experience from 1 to 80 was a joy. For a while, the game shone with players eagerly devouring every piece of content they could. However, this honeymoon feeling wouldn't last long. As players quickly got to level cap, an epiphany soon occurred to many players. Despite its innovation, Guild Wars 2 could not retain onto many players' attention post-launch due to its lack of endgame content. There was no hardcore raiding content, instead there was easy, buggy dungeons. Getting exotic gear, the best gear at the time, was simply done by completing these easy dungeons. Furthermore, structured PvP was horrendously underdeveloped at the time. The World v World was in its apparent golden age. Finally, to top it off, the personal story was rather lackluster and splintered, not to mention its infamous press 2 to kill the big baddie fight. For myself, my friends, and many other players, we loved the 1 through 80 leveling experience. We knew the game had potential, but there was little value once we reached 80. There was simply no gripping content to keep us engaged. We came, we saw, we conquered, and we moved on, some of us never looking back. Yet the game continued to develop onward with or without us. Those that stuck around were probably chasing after legendary weapons or perfecting dungeon runs. However, 5 months after the launch, in January of 2013, ArenaNet soon released Season 1 of The Living World. The Living World was to be live free updates that would bring new story and content to the game. The Living World in fact brought me back to the game, though in a very fair weather way, where I would log into each new patch, eat up as much content as I could, and log out as soon as I was done. Though dipping in and out of the game, Season 1 was extremely fun, having me do many things from fixing signs or watching the capital city of Lion's Arch be destroyed, and watch the rise of the 6th hidden Elder Dragon. The content wasn't perfect in any way. It was neither cohesive or consecutively released, but it was something new and fresh to play. To its detriment, barely any of Season 1's content can be replayed as it was only available during its live duration. During the mix-up of Season 1, ArenaNet controversially introduced Ascended Gear, a new tier gear above Exotic that was significantly harder to get through the new 5-man group content, Fractals of the Mist. Season 1 roughly ran for 13 months of irregular patches. After a 3-month break, Season 2 of the Living World began in June of 2014. It introduced 2 new maps into the game slowly over a multitude of patches. It was a great improvement story-wise over the game's personal story in Season 1. Unlike Season 1, it added permanent content into the game, and it was entirely more focused than the splintered personal story. Yet it too suffered from the same problems as Season 1 of not being released consecutively. It even had a huge 4-month break mid-season when the story was getting juicy. However, despite its setbacks, by the end of it, something exciting was happening for Guild Wars 2. Its first expansion, Heart of Thorns. Announced in January of 2015, this expansion meant a lot to all players. Whether they are returning players who left the game at launch or those who actively played every day, this expansion was what everyone was praying for. More content. Unfortunately, not to their discredit, ArenaNet had other ideas. This expansion was to be focused primarily on features. It was meant to be the stepping stone for future expansions to be built upon, and much to its credit, the introduced features did change the game entirely. Traits were reworked into a specialization system, and Heart of Thorns was to introduce elite specializations. These elite specs were a way to alter the playstyle of the existing 8 classes into something different. For example, the Ranger could become a Druid, allowing them to take a more supportive role than its usual DPS. Then they introduced an entirely new class, the Revenant, a mystical warrior that channeled previous legends from lore with its own elite spec as well. Masteries were put into the game as a new way to progress your character in PvE past level 80. They were means to unlock new abilities to better navigate the new jungle area and combat new enemies in a Zelda or Transylvania fashion. The most groundbreaking of these was gliding, allowing players to soar across maps in the new expansion and eventually the core game. ArenaNet also promised new legendary weapons and legendary armor along with the long-awaited inclusion of raids. Other features included guild halls, new structured PvP game mode, a new world map, and the return of our player character's voice. Parallel to the announcement of Heart of Thorns, the core game at this time was free to play. This allowed the core 1 through 80 experience open to all with only the expansion areas, elite specializations, and masteries locked behind the expansion paywall. As opposed to what many think when an MMO goes free to play, the game was not dying. In fact, it was at its peak of new players joining the game. The game model still remained buy it and play forever. It just added a very generous free trial. Heart of Thorns launched in October of 2015 and was met with mixed reactions. It delivered a lot of features that drastically changed the way the game was played, yet again the same problem came up, the lack of content. The 4 new maps were the vertically largest in the game and utilized the masteries, namely gliding, expertly and were filled with new interesting locations. These maps had high content density, but to some it was not enough. The story was enjoyable, but quite short and seemingly rushed. The new World v World map was met with lukewarm reactions, and the new structured PvP mode was a complete flop. Furthermore, despite promises, raids, and new legendaries were still not in the game at launch. Yet the expansion did a lot right. Elite specs were a smashing success along with guild halls and gliding. Most importantly, Heart of Thorns did build a foundation for future expansions to be added into the game. Following Heart of Thorns' launch, the game went through some turbulent times. For 2 months after launch, the game was in a state of perpetual content drought. With silence from ArenaNet, the community grew wary of there being no end in sight for this drought or patches to support Heart of Thorns. Some community members were also further enraged due to the fact that neither raids, new legendaries, or legendary armor were in the game yet. Adding to the fire, ArenaNet came out with a blog post stating that new legendary development would be put on hold. It wasn't a pleasant scene for the community at the time. 2 months after the launch of Heart of Thorns, the first raid wing came out. Along with this update came 3 new legendaries as well. This brought back some faith for most of the community, however, the drought continued on after this. 4 months passed until the next raid wing came out. However, during this drought, structured PvP saw a huge revamp with the inclusion of the league systems with better rewards too. 3 months later, the third raid wing came out in the game. These raids were not only fresh content, but they were hardcore and delved into old Guild Wars 1 lore that we all been wanting from ArenaNet post Heart of Thorns. However, this caused debates over raids in the community on the fairness of fresh new good content only being added in the form of hardcore content. Many non-raiders felt left out, though soon the discussions were soon silenced with the release of Season 3 of The Living World the very next month. Launched in July of 2016, Season 3 of The Living World displayed that the devs truly learned from the game's past mistakes and actually worked to address them. For starters, the storyline finally began to delve into old storylines left hanging from the launch of the game and from Guild Wars 1. Non-raiders were no longer left out of interesting stories, as the Raid Wings 1 through 3 stories were actually tied into Season 3's story of The Living World. Secondly, it was released consecutively with about a 72-day average in between patches. For the first time in the history of Guild Wars 2, there was a consistent stream of new and good content coming into the game. Thirdly, it came with a new map every release filled with content. No revamping old maps with limited content like Season 1 or slowly expanding only 2 maps over 8 patches like in Season 2. For each 6 patches of Season 3 came a new map. Fourthly, the story had consistent quality writing, storylines, lore tie-ins, and implication gameplay-wise. Each episode was masterfully voice-acted with interesting lore bombs and satisfactory closure on some old plot points while opening new ones as well. Fifthly, it delivered the promise of new legendary weapons to the game along with legendary armor. New legendaries were being added in each patch, and finally legendary armor was added as well as the ultimate reward for raiding. Finally, it added a 4th new raid wing, revamped the structured PvP lobby, drastically changed Wealthy World and structured PvP rewards, and added 3 new fractals to the game. It was soon becoming apparent that this was the golden age to be playing Guild Wars 2. The game kept on improving at a consecutive rate. This leads to the present day. We are mere weeks away from the launch of the second expansion of Guild Wars 2, titled Path of Fire. This expansion doesn't look to be as feature-rich as Heart of Thorns, but purely about content, and a lot of it. Taking upon where the story left off in the finale of Season 3, we're heading to the Crystal Desert and further south to Vabi. ArenaNet is introducing 5 humongous maps into the game. According to the game director and verified with the leaks, these maps are equivalent to the size of the 4 Heart of Thorn maps plus the 6 Living World maps easily. To navigate these enormous maps, the new mastery in this expansion will be mounts. 4 mounts are being added into the game with their own unique abilities for getting around the map. They're not just a speed boost, but have their own unique flavor on how to travel. Furthermore, there will be 9 new elite specs for each class, further expanding the specialization system and giving new ways to play each class. Other new content includes new armor, new weapon skins, new enemies, and a new system called bounties, along with a new guild hall. This expansion looks to be the culmination of all ArenaNet has learned over the past 5 years and packaged into one entity. And the craziest part about it is that it comes out on September 22nd. It's only a couple weeks away. And even crazier than that, they plan to continue on with Season 4 of The Living World only 2 months after that, continuing this consistent stream of content that this game has been lacking since launch. Truly an improvement, and truly shows growth in the company and in the game. This is clearly looking to be the golden age to play Guild Wars 2, and it is a ripe time to join the community. Try it now for free, and over these coming weekends, August 11th to 13th and August 18th to the 20th, everyone, whether they're a paid player or a free-to-play player, can test out the new Path of Fire demo. So don't just take my word for it, try the game out for yourself. Thank you so much for watching this video, or if you've made it all the way through my rambling for like 15 minutes, I'm proud of you, and hopefully I hope to see you in Tyria soon. Thank you, goodbye.
Hurry! Save me!